Yeah.
Yeah, just turn left when you go out the door. It's right at the end of it. He is ill. I think he's intending to call in on Zoom.
Yeah, she sent it to him. Also,
We're not sure on that, so I'm going to delay a little bit.
He told me he was going to call in
Oh, he did tell you.
as he was leaving. I came in to grab something and he was going to call in.
yeah, how'd you fix that?
You have to hit start virtual camera on that.
Oh, I got it.
Yes, please, because we're not going to start until he signs on. Jake, did you schedule this with a stop time?
I did not.
Okay.
Haven't ever needed to in the past. It's usually been an hour. So sometimes it lasts a little less, sometimes it lasts a little more.
Okay.
I will need to stop at 3. I will need to stop at 3.
I did add your admin added to your guys' calendar up till
Up to-
an hour.
Okay.
Better every day.
Hi, Jackie. Nice to meet you.
We're waiting because Commissioner Korn gave direction that he will participate by Zoom, but he has not logged in yet, so we're trying to call him before I start the meeting. So usually stop at 2:45, so that it's 15 minutes of people that want to talk to the people that they can get out at 3:00 then. Does that work? Or do we want to go all the way to 3?
If we need to go to 3, that's fine.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Because I always feel uncomfortable walking away with people.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. And if I need to, I'll keep it brief if we need to follow up. But thank you.
Yep.
If we have a long enough agenda, if we need to go through.
It's public
Thank you.
comment goes first. And I know that we have people that are going to present something.
Yes.
You do have an executive session with items, so when you're managing of time, should be 15 minutes if you want a lot, right?
Yeah.
It should be 15 minutes or less, and Mr. Wilson will be on for that.
Is it placing, is it actually lifting notice of title or placing? Okay.
Otherwise, I would have.
Put it first next time. You have any answer? Okay.
We should plan to
All right, let's just go ahead.
2:45. Should we plan to go to 2:45 then?
Well, I'll announce how we'll do it. No answer from him? All right, it is 1:34, and we are here for a planning workshop update. I'm going to start with some housekeeping items. At 2:45, we are going to end the meeting and go into executive session. If we need to go into another meeting to continue this agenda, we will do so. And then if Commissioner Korn joins us, then he'll just join us in the middle. So with that, we will turn this over to our planning director.
The first item on the, Jacob L. Planning Director, first item on the agenda is public comments. You want to just start from there?
Nobody wants to talk?
You go first. Yes, please. Well, I'll be brief. Dave Bowman. I noted there's an item on the agenda for items raised by the public, and I don't know, and I'm hoping that the RV Park Code Amendment will be on there, so I don't know if you want to, if I should speak to that now or wait till that, or not speak at all, or what. But that's primarily why I came here, other than the wholesale revisions of Title 12, which I haven't had enough time to dive into, but I see they're not an action item for today, looks like,
Okay.
so.
I would recommend, if you have a comment on a specific topic, I would recommend making it.
Okay, so, and I, in printing out and gathering up the draft packet for today and the agenda, I also printed out what I had presented to the Board of Commissioners last week about removing RV parks from rural zones in the use tables, and then I forgot to bring that with me, so I can't refer to that, but it's all been brought up before. I was presented to the board 2 years ago. It had overwhelming support from the public, as I think everybody here knows. It was just that the two commissioners, the majority on the board at that time, wanted nothing to do with it, and it just wasn't going to happen. So I've been waiting for a new board to come in. It makes zero sense to have RV parks in rural areas. The whole idea of a commercial use table or the conditional use permit is to take a use that's going to be in a particular area and condition it to ameliorate or mitigate or eliminate impacts to neighboring properties. And if those impacts are such in that use that they can't really be mitigated, then the whole thing shouldn't even happen. And that is obviously the case in rural zones with RV parks. And there's wildfire considerations, there's traffic, there's crime, there's all sorts of stuff, and they simply cannot be mitigated. There are rural areas where there's farm and timberland is not where recreational opportunities exist. There's no way to enforce that they don't become long-term residences, and a host of other reasons, which I have laid out, and you both have emails to that effect. So I'm hoping that this can then get on the agenda and put forth the people in a hearing and make it happen.
Thank you.
That's all I have. Thanks.
So I'm going to say for the record, that was Dave Bowman, Bonner County resident.
Oh, sorry.
And then make sure that we say our name and county of residence when we come
We
up.
forgot
with
to
this.
ask.
He just speaks all the time. We just know you. We know you. All right, sir, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Williams. Eric Brubaker, residing at 421 South 4th Avenue.
You don't have to say that whole address if you don't, you're just Bonner County resident.
So
Now we can find you.
a little bit of background. I'm a professional planner. I got my start with Bonner County back in 2005. I worked for Bonner County from 2005 until 2008, where I went to work for the city of Ponderay as their planner and planning director and community development and parks director as well. And I was there for about 15 years. I'm here today as a representative of Project 7B. That's the hat that I'm wearing, and I'm a volunteer. And this is similar to the question that was asked before. I see on your agenda, there's a discussion of the comp plan under item 3, and then there's also an action item, which I presume is maybe not the right time, under item 7, Would you like me to speak at that time, or would you like me to speak now? I think that was answered before, but.
I think you can do your comment as maybe why you want to compel us to take your position, and then if you want to speak on a specific item after you hear it presented, you can still do that.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm gonna just speak now a little bit about what we're here to talk about today. The work that's been put in by staff, planning commission, county commission over the last several years towards well-conceived comp plan has been, unmeasurable. It's been a tremendous effort. And so I stand here with humility, and as we discuss all the work that's gone into this project, one of the things that is striking is how much of it was done in-house and over a several year period. And so a few of us were discussing ways that we could help basically bring this thing to a close in a way that makes all of that work basically super clean product, super defensible, following best practices. And one of the things we thought about was, okay, is there some way we could bring in a third-party consultant to basically review the work that's been done, make sure the cross-references and basically the goals and objectives are consistent with the policies and ordinances that you're moving towards. And so to that end, we would like the county's support for a grant to provide funding for a third-party consultant that might help us put a bow on particularly the land use component and map that's been brought around the county. And the idea would be, if the county was willing to put in a small amount of match and commit to a small amount of match. I'm not asking you to do that today, but we wanted to bring you on board before we put in the effort of writing a grant. And talking to several consultants, it appears that the range of this effort would be about $10,000 to $15,000, and we would be looking for 10 to 50% match from the county, certainly not to exceed $5,000. We did draft kind of a resolution, and I will submit that to you or to the planning director. This is just a draft, but it might make it easier if at such future time you decide to take us up on that offer to write a grant. So that's all I have to say about it. Susan, the project's going to be.
Before you leave, though, are you requesting that the board put your request for a grant match as an agenda item for a vote?
Not today. I don't think that's appropriate, but for a future time, yes. I would like the county's blessing on a grant application before we put forth the effort to do that.
Okay. I'm not asking you today. I'm asking you, are you asking us to put it on an agenda?
On a future agenda,
So
yes.
what's the future? I'm halfway looking at Susan too. What is the future?
Don't look at Susan.
Well, because you said, you answered no, and your answer should be yes, and you should tell me when.
Sorry,
So
my no was for today.
it can't be
No
today.
today, but
So
yes.
what is the timeline, and when are you going to,
I
and
think
then,
as soon as we can get it agendized, or probably the next planning update would be appropriate.
Susan Drumheller.
I think
County-
you've been tapped out, so.
Susan Drumheller, county resident, and there is a deadline for a state grant that we're looking to get. It's a statewide grant that's at the end of the month, actually. So if there's any way you could agendize this for business meeting, maybe it's too late for that next week.
It is too late for next week's agenda. It is
Okay.
not too late for the
For the
following one, but it would just be putting it on the agenda, and you guys would have to present information to the board for a board vote.
Sure. Yeah. that'd be
Okay.
fine.
And I think it would be very helpful to understand specifically the timelines that would be involved. So appreciate understanding up front and obviously having more information on potential cost, but then also if awarded, when would the award be known? When would the services be available? Because if the board were to decide to move in that direction, we have to align that with the consideration of the bigger process for completing the planning commission's work and then the board taking on whatever is proposed by them. So we would need to understand how that alignment does or doesn't work with the overall schedule.
Yes.
And specific costs, because saying you have to give a dollar amount because the board has to vote on a dollar, not a 10 to 15%. Okay. So the date you're looking at is March 25th for an agenda item for 7B to present a request for a county match for a grant application.
Yes. And, I mean, we could certainly talk more if you like about, what we envisioned the scope of work and how, whether you would like to participate in, selecting who would do the work, for instance. I mean, I think working through some of those details could follow later. I think the money would
You would need to work through those details before, because you're asking the county to present a confirmation that they would pay a percentage of that.
Yes, however, I think the proposed resolution would be not to exceed $5,000. So, I mean, I think that would, be the commitment, or you could change that to whatever you want the cap to be. We just think that having the participation of the county would, help us to get the money so that we could do this, and also it would give you ownership in it and certainly be able to help dictate what that scope of work should be and that sort of thing. So I just think we want this to be a partnership, and we really want to assist the county with having that, what we consider a review of the work that's been done with some suggestions for edits.
And so it's up to 7B to present it to the county. What I will commit to is the placing your item on the agenda for the board vote. How you guys present it is up to you guys, and what you do in terms of confirming or collaborating or presenting. Okay. And so the date is March 25th. That is the
Monday.
It's a no, that's a Tuesday.
Oh, Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday.
And just, I think it might help to clarify that if you're going to seek any feedback, it would need to be limited to a single commissioner, because we're going to be asked ultimately to vote, not deliberate and vote. So if you're going to seek any feedback, between now and bringing it forward to the board, it would for
Just
a decision,
one.
it would need to be limited to a single commissioner.
And I would also encourage discussion with the planning department, because
Sure.
collaboration might be beneficial to look at. Okay? All right, so I'll put the request in and I'll copy. I only have Susan's email, don't have yours. So I will copy Susan on the request for the agenda item for the 25th.
Perfect. So good. No, I was just going to say, when I spoke about humility, one of the things that's really important is that we involve the planning commission. And that's why we're bringing it up now before we bring it as an action item and the planning director. So please, I hope you guys have that conversation and see if it's something you're interested in or not. So that's all I have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Marcia.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Marcia Stevens. I live in Bonner County in Spirit Lake. I just want to second a little bit about what Dave Bowman said, that hopefully that we can get this on the agenda regarding the RV parks in our areas. And specifically because the comp plans encourage development of a variety of housing options, including mobile home parks, tiny home communities, and recreational vehicle parks located in areas that are compatible with their density. And I'm not going to repeat what he said, but that is the reason. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? There's somebody online.
Jonna. We have two online.
John Plant.
Yes, Jonna Plant. Sagal. I just wanted to mention also the RV park. I totally agree. Conditional use permits don't work because no conditions eliminate the impact of those. Also, I fully support Project 7B, and hopefully you guys say yes. I think we could use the professional help. And then also I noticed some Title 12 changes, and I just want to remind everybody that Idaho Code 676509, that is the minimum that they request that we put in our Title 12. I would prefer more transparency, and I don't think we need to do the minimum and go down to the bare minimum. We're actually losing in traction if we go back to the bare minimum. So that's all I have to say on the Title 12 changes. Please don't go to the bare minimum. Keep more transparency. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there a second comment online?
There was, but they took their hand out.
Okay. All right. Director Gabel?
I don't have any other announcements. And I'll try to get through.
Did I miss someone's hand back there? I heard whispering. Okay. All right, sorry.
I'll try to get through the main updates, our financial and other data updates pretty quickly. Just stop me if I'm going too fast, if you have any additional questions. So
Okay.
we do have a number of extra action items and other agenda items on here. There's all of our meetings for the month. We did, like I mentioned earlier, I believe we added one, or the Planning Commission added one meeting for this week, or for this month, to try to get through and come up with a final draft of the land use component. Other than that, I think all these meetings are on track. I don't think any of these have been canceled as of yet. The Zoning Commission does have action items, so they're meeting this month. So for January and February, we did see kind of a large number of building location permits coming in. As compared to previous years, it's similar, which led towards the higher revenue numbers you'll see. We did see a drop so far this year, or this fiscal year even, in quasi-judicial land use files and land divisions total. So we're just kind of tracking those as they come in. There's the total number that feeds into that previous graph. We had a slight dip in February when compared to other years in public record requests, so that's good. A little less, I think March will have a few more than that. No changes in the org chart. We do have one vacancy for a planner two. I've made an offer, we're kind of waiting on that to be accepted and the start date to be arranged, so it should be probably by the end of the month I'll have someone filling that seat. We fully seated again. We have, as far as revenue goes, we are about right on track when you look at a percentage of the revenue is for the budgeted amount so far for the fiscal year. The expenses were about 2% less when you compare it to the total as we were this time last year when you look through the end of February. So about right on track. When you look through the projections through the summer months, we should be right on target for revenue projections, which again was a slight dip from last year. I think Commissioner Domke pointed out with the fires in California, we might see more people moving this direction, so we'll see if that impacts or how it impacts, and if rates change, that tends to lead towards more. We just got the data for the comp plan on the total dwelling units for 2024 as a calendar year, so those have been implementing and pulled into the land use component. So we're about 600 dwelling units per year on average for the last 6 years. So some years are 570, some are 630, but as an average about 600. So I think we're about right on track. Those are the graphs that go along with that. On the violation side, so I had Katie update these graphs just to show, rather than giving you a year-to-date every month, just I wanted to see, or I wanted the board to be able to see the change from from just February and then year-to-date, so you can see every month, like what are we not producing, but what are we working on that month, and how do we arrange? So that's where those numbers came from. That's that gray box that is highlighted on the screen there. And then Title 12 violations. These aren't nearly as numerous. Sometimes the building violations lead towards Title 12. I think I've mentioned that in the past as well. Before we get to Title 11, I did skip over, my apologies, on software, Munis, Deckard, Intergov updates. We have Deckard on the agenda for later on, so I'll skip over that. But we are working with technology. We have a meeting tomorrow on the citizen self-serve implementation. We have a plan to modify our front office and add some some kiosk computers. I'm working with technology on a plan for that. I think I've mentioned in the past as well, the ability to do more transparent, add more publicly available data for both Title 11 and Title 12 applications. So working through that, I think we have a 10 o'clock meeting with the implementation team with Tyler tomorrow. So if you have any additional questions on that, I can give you some feedback later. Right now, it's still in the infancy. Hopefully, we're up and running by or before summertime. So as far as pending proposed ordinance changes, these are just as a workshop, FYI. Does the board have any appetite for this? This is in no means a hearing or asking for approval. Of course, we would go through the typical process to adopt an ordinance change if the board were to give that kind of input. Title 11 hasn't been really updated substantially in some time. We've seen a number of frustrations, both in members of the public and then in trying to interpret and apply this code. So there are a number of changes here that would kind of help fix some ongoing issues we've had. That being said, there is a lot here, so if the board doesn't want to go over it all in detail, we could schedule a separate workshop to discuss this and even the Title 12 stuff, or we could do those separately. Otherwise, Katie's here and her and her team helped draft this, and then the management team reviewed it and made some additional changes, so I'd be happy to go over it now if you'd like.
So my general perspective is I think it's warranted to dig into it and really ask questions about and better understand in a hearing to do what we can to improve Title 11 and Title 12 now, because we don't know how long the interim is until the comp plan is finished, and then that gets codified, and there could be enough time that I would think that this effort might be warranted to try and provide clarity for the files and the applications that come up between now and when we implement further changes based on looking at what the comp plan updates ultimately require.
I don't disagree, I just don't know, are you saying now is in this meeting now?
No,
'Cause
I'm saying
thinking
now,
it's
I'm
a
sorry.
standalone.
Yes,
Okay.
now is, and I believe now is the time to begin that
Yes.
process.
I don't disagree, and I think we need to give it its own meeting. That way the public has more than enough time to provide their input on that change, as well as the planning commission and the planners being able to kind of digest that, so it's a thoughtful change, so I'm agreeable with that.
The planning commission doesn't have any jurisdiction over Title 11. That's building regulations, so they're.
Planning, yeah.
Yeah, so I would rather workshop this separately and separate out the Title 12 stuff. The Title 12 in the past, these are procedural changes to align with state statute. As one commenter mentioned, yes, it would be a modification, but I can point out a lot of disagreements the code has with itself. So I could present that at the workshop to the planning commission. My goal was to see if the board understood this. I typically workshop agenda or potential changes to Title 12 with the Planning Commission, give their input on it, make any additional changes, then schedule for a hearing.
So the planning commission typically always has input on these. I understand what you're saying, so that's what I'm saying is when we receive these updates, especially on some of the participants, they always have input. And instead of us saying, well, they technically don't, I'm saying we should just get their input so that we can move forward, because I'm sure Matt Linscott might have some comments on it or changes that we have, because some people spend a good amount of time reviewing it. So it's similar to what you're saying is to do a workshop with them is what I'm saying to do, and then open it up to the public and have the board take a look at the changes. Are you, what is your ideal time for taking a look at this so we can nail that down?
And we've been drafting these Title 11 changes for several months, so it's not like, it would be nice to get it done before we get the big rush of permits we usually get throughout the summer, just to help clarify some frustrations we've had in administering this code. I don't think that the Planning Commission would weigh too heavily on the changes to Title 11. It's, like I said, it's building regulation. It's really applying specific standards, but we're not, it's different from than your land use code by a long shot. So the Planning Commission asked if they had any jurisdiction over this. I had a conversation with the chair about it and kind of explained where their authority lies. But if the board wants the input from the Planning Commission, I'm happy to present it to them. I just don't want to they're really focused right now, and if I give them anything new and shiny to look at, they'll get distracted from what they've been working on.
Well,
so-
my point is that members of the planning commission send us very detailed comments about
Sure.
these things. And so if we're giving thoughtful consideration, if you don't want to do that route, and then afterwards I get a long email from planning commissioners,
Oh, yeah.
that's what I'm trying to address. So regardless, what is the time frame that we want to take a look at Title 11 then?
I think if we can at least give planning commission the opportunity, they could decide whether or not they think it's pertinent. And then for them to offer feedback. And if we could have a hearing, if we could really try to make this happen in April, then I think we can get ahead of the heavy lift that's going to be coming with the additional comp plan review work. That'll happen, I believe, in the 2 months probably following.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I think next month, April, would probably be a good time to try to really bring this one forward and get it revised.
Okay, so let's put a
The
request.
planning commission will have let's just call it a potential open meeting while they come up with the final draft of the land use component before they can hold a hearing. There's that noticing timeline and period, so they might be just an empty, not necessarily empty, but some white space on an agenda we can add this to. So I can present it to them and get their input on it. Title 11 typically it doesn't require, nor do we normally do or have we done in the past, a hearing for these type of changes. If the board likes, we could schedule it for a hearing. I think we mentioned this before when talking about adding Panhandle Health as more involved with our Title 11. So
I
It's up to the
prefer
board
that
on that.
approach.
Sure.
I just think these are all very important to the public, and so giving more of an opportunity for a focused conversation to happen, I think would be beneficial.
Okay.
You
I can take that direction.
That's fine.
Thank you for asking that.
Yeah.
And I do agree, there's, the comments of items that have already been highlighted in here where we have lack of clear definition, redundancy, things of that nature. Just on the face of the volume of those items alone, it makes sense to take action.
Some of these, we need input. We don't know how to solve it. Some of it, like you said, Commissioner, is just redundancy. Yeah. So on the Title 12, you want to take the same direction on that?
That would
Yes.
be my preference.
The majority of this is cleaning up some jurisdiction issues, or not issues, but clarifying the jurisdiction of the planning and the zoning commissions, aligning some of this stuff a little bit closer to state statute. The procedural stuff, the noticing standards, some parts of the statute or our ordinance call for a 22-day notice. Some parts say refer back to 6509. Some of it, so it's just not clear throughout the ordinance. So that's why we've added this and referred directly back to 6509. Also, there's been some discussion at the state level about modifying the standard for noticing and potentially removing the notice in the newspaper and doing more digital notices on websites. So that being said, if that's something the state's going to do across the board, I'd say the closer we can get to statute now, so when statute changes, we don't have to go back and change our ordinance. I think it'd be easier. But if you want a more time for agency notice, that's fine as well. It's something we can definitely add.
I just think having the conversation based on the proposed amendments will be good, so we can talk through in detail at that future meeting.
If I understand you guys correctly, the board would like me to present both the Title 11 and Title 12 changes in a workshop to the Planning Commission, get their input on it, and have them make a recommendation to the board.
That's my preference.
Well, I would like them to review it for suggestions of what they see. So, yeah.
Okay.
And with, again, and I appreciate you trying to figure out the timing piece there. I know we are asking them to split their attention now a little bit, and that creates some challenges, understandably, with the comprehensive plan efforts that are happening right now. But I think if they maybe even would like a brief breather in the midst of everything that they're reviewing at the moment. I don't know, but I do think there's value in us pursuing these changes now. I don't want to take the perspective of we'll wait on everything until the comprehensive plan is complete, because then we wait so long and then we're kicking ourselves for the fact that we haven't fixed things that we could make more effective and efficient now. So.
Well, it addresses the issue we had with the file yesterday of making a decision on the planning side on an anticipated thought of what the comprehensive plan would be, but that change hadn't occurred yet. And so the board wasn't willing to make a decision in that regard. And so if we need to make changes now, then we should make thoughtful changes, but with understanding that we want to do a real comprehensive review so that we don't have to keep making such big sweeping changes, is I think what the direction of this board is. So if it takes a little bit longer, but we do it right, I think the community would accept that.
Most of the Title 12 changes are procedural changes. They're not necessarily going to be more in line or out of line with the current policies of the comp plan, but we can further that analysis later.
And I do think that that'll be a valuable part of probably that meeting when we get into the details. To your point is, do we want to stay focused on that aspect right now until, unless we have some really obvious things that could just be clarified. So I think we should clearly define the scope of intent of changes.
Yeah. I do think we need to hold off on making any major sweeping changes, like use table changes, subdivision changes to Title 12 until the comprehensive plan is done and the Planning Commission and the board has adopted additional or new implementation component, goals, policies, and objectives to give us very clear guidance on how the ordinances should change. So I've committed, as of the last few years, to make these procedural changes as I see issues with the code where it's in conflict with itself. So that's all this is. There's some additional changes to appeal language and some other things that came from Bill's review. But yeah, that's where I'm at with that. So that's fine. I can present it to the Planning Commission. Hopefully, the light's pretty close to the end of the tunnel with the land use component. I'm looking over at Mr. Davis back there. I think they're getting close to a final draft of the land use component. So I think we'll have some time here in the near future to start reviewing these type of things. That being said, the next agenda item is the proposed amendments as requested by members of the public. So Commissioner Domke asked me to add this onto the agenda. So yes, I heard some public comments, and generally the public is interested in modifying Title 12. So I've seen a number of times where we've had some applications come in where they are the applicant on the text amendment, other times where they're just appealing to the commissioners to make the changes. So first question is what does the board, how do you want to address these type of requests? You want to refer them back as a due process style amendment request, which would be them as the applicant requesting through the Planning Commission and then to the board some specific changes? Or do you want to entertain those in a workshop session? More or less how does the board want to handle these type of requests from members of the public? It's just a process before we look at any content.
You want to have a comment? Go ahead. And I want to recognize, Commissioner Korn is online now.
Okay.
Commissioner Korn, do you have a comment on this item?
No, I'm just following you guys, and I'm agreeing with everything you guys are saying so far.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Domke, did you have a comment on Director Gabel's
Yeah, I
question?
appreciate the question. From a process perspective, I prefer to be as consistent as possible. So I want to, as we have items come forward that are brought to us by members of the public, I want to seriously consider them. And I do like the idea of routing them through the commission, whichever it is that's appropriate, planning or zoning, depending on the item, to get their thoughts and feedback first, and then bring it forward to the board. We can decide at that point if it should be a broader workshop, depending on the topic, or if we just bring it forward for a hearing for a decision. But I want to maintain consistency with our process. Part of that is the commission may have perspectives that we would lack on some of these topics. And so I think it's helpful for us to hear that. And the challenge that I'm struggling with in my own head at the moment is wanting to we could bog ourselves down on the one hand with a lot of individual items. When we're trying to do a broader change with looking at the comprehensive plan. But then going back to the conversation we were just having about if we know there's something important and valuable that we could correct now, I don't want to just table it and have that continue to be an issue for the county in the interim. So I'll use the example that was brought forward already with the RV park within the use tables. I believe that it's been clearly brought forward by numerous members of the community that that's an item of great concern to them. And so I don't want to ignore that. So I think we do have to look at what we think is the impact and validity of each item and then decide if we want to move it through the standard process. So for me, as an example, the RV park question is one of, I think that there's enough issues associated with that through our county and enough controversy. I don't think it's good to wait on that issue. And so I think it would make sense to actually bring that forward through a standard process to make a decision.
So barring the specific example, I think in general, I think that that's reasonable that because that process has to be developed. And so that's what we say that would be. I think that's different for one where it already went through and was workshopped. And I think, because when we're talking about the RV issue, this one already actually went through workshop in the county and then it was voted on. And so in that case, are you wanting it to go back through for a discussion? Because that we already did a workshop on the RV and the use table. And so what I handed Mr. Bowman was the documents that he said he didn't have because he had emailed those to us. On one like this, are you saying go back through? Because for me, when I looked at this issue, it was no different than kind of some of the, we've already seen the review. They're just looking for a vote on it. Bring it before the new board, kind of a vote on it. So are you wanting both to go through or ones that are just fresh to go through?
So I'm saying anything that hasn't gone through the process, I think it should go through the process. I'm not fully aware of that particular instance in the sense of if we've already had that process and it just hasn't come for a vote, then I think we can just take the next step. It's just, but I'd like to be consistent with the process.
Right, and that's why I want to split out. There's a little bit of difference in one that already came before the board for a vote, already went through a workshop, versus one that has, this is an issue that I want you and it's fresh and the planning
Right.
commission and we didn't do
Gotcha.
a workshop versus one that did.
So
'Cause
essentially it's a
like an appeal.
reconsideration?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Of some,
Okay.
and so does that person, because my initial response to when Mr. Bowman brought it forward was, he already did the work, we already did the workshop, just put it on the agenda for the board to review for a vote, because we already discussed this. He's asking us to review essentially what already happened. Versus had the board never seen it, we never had a workshop, that information isn't available to us, then I can see the argument of go back through planning, let's do maybe a workshop to see how we'd workshop that and see what it would look like. That's kind of where
Yeah, I hear what
my
you're saying.
difference was.
So I'd say we should try to treat it as consistently as we can with other items. So to me, that would be like a reconsideration then. And then it could just come forward, to your point, from understanding what you're proposing. It could just come forward to the board as a reconsideration essentially for a decision.
So for what we're telling the planning commission is for proposed amendment changes from members of the public, the first blush needs to go through the planning and or zoning commission or whichever one,
Planning
and then come to the board of commissioners. If it's already gone through that process, then it's coming for basically a review of a decision made. It can come on the draft agenda, is what we're saying.
Yeah, to me, that would be consistent with our other processes to say there's an opportunity for a reconsideration.
Okay. So my other comment on the way this is listed, because I want to be fair, is the person that brought forward the reason this item is here, because you put it on the agenda, brought forward that they wanted the comment about the RV use table issue to be discussed. And so I think it's appropriate that we allow that discussion underneath this section because that was what they requested, and the response that you gave was that you requested it to be on this agenda, and my response to the person, because in that meeting, I responded to the person saying, I will get it on the agenda, but you sent it on this agenda, and so I think it's reasonable to have the discussion on what their specific amendment request is, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I printed off the document that Mr. Bowman forgot to bring to make sure you had it, because I didn't want that. So that's what I handed, so whenever conspiracy theory says, what did she hand him? It's the secret note that he wrote, and to let that be discussed because it got on this agenda versus going straight to our agenda, and then we can have that discussion. Mr. Bowman, you have the floor. Remember, we got to get out of here 2:45.
Okay, well, Dave Bowman, Bonner County. I don't know what else needs to be said that I haven't already.
Treat it like
If you have
new
any
people in this
questions.
room,
Okay.
because remember, he doesn't remember your workshop.
Okay, so the ask is really to just go into the use table and put us, to strike out the letter C under the rural areas, which are at the top here. It'd be ag forest, rural residential, and rural service center, which probably down the line will change because rural service centers may be different going forward, but no matter. That's it. It's probably the simplest code amendment that's ever come down the pike with the biggest positive effects on the county. And as I said at the last meeting, when I put this forward 2 years ago, there was a packed room that day, and I don't know how, I lost count of how many people got up and how many people were on Zoom that said, yes, we support this, please do it, including Jeremy Grimm, who never saw a development he didn't like, and he said, I rarely agree with the Bowmans, but this is a great idea. So it's a ridiculously simple change, and I think it's been demonstrated pretty clearly that RV parks just don't belong in these rural settings where there is no recreation. They're quite likely to become a nuisance. You cannot mitigate the impacts on neighbors. And Chief Armstrong has spoken to this board and other groups about our big concerns about wildfire in the WUI as we develop more into the WUI, wildland urban interface.
I was going to
sorry.
say, WUI needs to be defined.
Wildland urban interface, which continues to, as we grow into that more and more and more, and there's, I mean, nothing, and I was at Spirit Lake Fire Department, or Fire District yesterday at their board meeting. They have grave concerns about issues of, packing 20 RVs into a tiny space with propane tanks and gasoline tanks, and, you get a high wind and a fire, it's just gonna go. And they just don't belong. They belong, and we're not against RV parks. They belong along Highway 95 in places where you've got fire hydrants and water sources and urban services and near recreational areas. So we're not against RV parks in any way, just put them where they belong and not where they don't.
Thank you.
So, any questions?
Appreciate it.
No questions. No questions because it's a vote
So,
item.
confirm the
thanks.
district forum is,
Yeah.
has any feedback on our,
No, we can give him no feedback because he's asking for a vote.
no, I mean on the approach that we've discussed. I don't
So
think he,
this is the root of my concern, Commissioners, is that, so Mr. Bowman just presented, and it's a process, not a concern with the change requested, but he presented a very specific change he wants to see in the code. He doesn't have a due process right for any application until he as a citizen applies for that specific change. So if the board takes this and says, yeah, we think that's a good idea, planning director, please present this to the planning commission as a possible change. And the planning commission looks at that and says, I think we can solve it in a different fashion and it'll address the same concern. And they go through and make some additional changes and it comes to the board and makes a change. So is a citizen then going to be frustrated that the change they wanted didn't take effect? Right. So that's, I think, where I'm asking. So does the board want to entertain these types of changes knowing that in the end they might not get exactly what they wanted? Or the opposite would be ask them to apply and have a due process right?
Thank you.
So, can I speak to that? Well, I won't if you don't want me to.
I'm trying to be real careful on you're asking us to make a decision on your item.
I would just say that process has happened numerous times in the past under previous boards where the board has directed the planning director, or vice versa, where the planning director even right now, is asking for code changes to be made, and it's really up to the board to say yes or no after they look at the changes.
I think the directors raised a good point, and my perspective on that is the citizen has the option of how they want to approach it, and so if they choose path A, then there's a process that follows, and if they choose path B, there's a different process. So I'm okay with the fact that the citizen gets to choose which path they want to take.
I am also, and I think that's also in line with what we did yesterday, where someone took an approach and we thought it was premature, and we made a vote based on, they presented it in what fashion. And I think any concern that the planning department has with the approach can be used as part of the discussion on whether or not you think the board should vote one way or another on it, but when a member of the community wants an item on the agenda for board consideration, that is their right to do, and I think the board has identified that in this case. We will put it on the agenda and have a board vote on the presentation that Mr. Bowman gave the board. And then if the decision from planning is that we should not do that because of the reasons that you're stating, then that should be something that we review in deliberation.
For this, I'm sorry.
Are you okay with that, Commissioner Donkey? Is that in line with what you're thinking?
Yes, I would agree with that. Is there an
It was a
aspect of that
pause, that's
direction
why I
that you're?
jumped in.
Oh, no, you're good.
It's okay.
Double Dutch.
Yeah. So I believe in this case, I think you alluded this earlier, Commissioner Williams, this was presented a couple years ago. The board did approve, they recommended it go to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission had a brief discussion about it and said, we'll consider this after the land use component the housing component and the land use component are finalized, and then we'll bring this back up. Don, does that sound familiar to you? Yeah.
Yep.
So
Commissioner.
we're almost done with that, so this hasn't fallen off my radar. I did plan to present this again to the Planning Commission and ask them how do they want to solve it. So.
Okay. Commissioner Korn, do you have a comment? He blanketly agrees with the sitting commissioners. Oh,
Just trying to find the right button. So we're not going to vote on this right now, is that correct?
correct,
Correct.
Okay, because I don't see it on today's agenda.
No.
correct.
Okay. All right, so you're wanting to put this on a Tuesday business meeting agenda?
Correct.
Okay. I don't see any problem with that, albeit that it might be premature, but like you said earlier, when someone from the public would like something to be put on the agenda, I don't know if it's really in our wheelhouse unless we just grossly think that it shouldn't be there, that we should go ahead and put it on there so for discussion.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're good with that. Any other questions on the Title 12 stuff or other proposed amendments as requested by members?
He doesn't
of the
have
public?
questions on his items. I can answer a question later. We've got 25 minutes to finish the rest of the items.
Okay, so here's just the public comment count. There are 505 public comments. We had 207 people attend the different open house workshops that we did around the county. So that's the final count. We have a spreadsheet we put together for all those. I'll present that later. Just know, fairly effective when you look at public outreach on getting people involved with land use. I think it went fairly well. Planning Commission's going through and evaluating all these and making changes. This is just an FYI, so this is a memorandum I put together for the changes to the area of city impact, now called area of impact 676526. So I've call it an engagement memo or a letter to the cities. I included in here Dover's area of impact proposal. I put on there specifically for discussion only. If you want to discuss it, you can, but no, we have to go through a noticed procedure, a noticed hearing procedure. I believe the reps from Bruin Yeager, who represent several cities throughout this county, said that we're going to have a number of these incoming. I know City of Sandpoint has their P&Z hearing next Tuesday to discuss theirs. I believe it goes to the City Council for another hearing and then they'll present it to the board. So my plan here, and feel free to read over the memorandum. If you have any additional questions, feel free to let me know. But just know it's something we started. We're trying to get done by the end of summer. So if, heaven forbid, something happens with the process and we mess up noticing or something along those lines, we have another few months to solve it before the end of the calendar year, which is the deadline for this statute. So trying to stay ahead of this so we don't run into any other issues going forward. So, questions on that, commissioners?
No, thank you for getting that process started.
I included the statute that came effective last July that changed for there.
Let me ask you a thing on Dover, actually.
Yes, ma'am.
You're aware of their, I don't want to be part of the city of Dover group right now?
Oh, yeah. We get calls every now and again of how do I DNX, and I said, you called the wrong guy, sorry. No,
Is that the answer?
It is.
Well, that's the answer I gave, but that
Yeah.
doesn't, it's not working.
So
Because
we
they're
don't
wanting to
process,
build.
we don't process annexations or de-annexations. We receive the land right when it comes back, so they notice us on those. It really doesn't affect the county other than when something gets de-annexed, we need to put a moratorium on that land and then establish zoning, like we did with that area outside of Priest River.
So what their questions are is, we're trying to de-annex, we're going to have a vote on de-annexation. Do we file building location permit requests with the county at the same time to save my spot? And I said, I'm pretty sure the answer is no, because we're not in charge of your stuff right now. So you're following that? Okay.
Until the RP number changes and it's a county RP number, or property number, and takes out the city code, we don't, that
Oh,
is not our
reply
jurisdiction.
all,
so.
please call Jake Bell to tell you.
Absolutely, you can send them my way.
Okay.
So we
I just
can-
want, I've been telling them that it's not us, but they keep asking. So your item is on for March 25th request. And I copied you on the email.
This will, just as a heads up, this will get a little dicey when we have a couple of cities where they want the same areas inside the area city impact. For this area right here is in both the proposal, if you can't see it, it's the very northern, oddly shaped piece where the dash is around it. I know that's very specific. This area right here, it's in both.
north?
It's east.
Oh, sorry. North when I look at it, you're right, east, yes. It's been both Dover's and the proposal for Dover and City of Sandpoint. So the statute speaks to they need to try to resolve it themselves, and when they can't, this county commissioners get to, so. Just a heads up, there's a couple of these, sounds like Hope and East Hope had some overlap. I think they're getting it solved. I talked to Mr. Quayle, and he thinks they're getting it resolved. It's in federal land, so I don't know why it matters anyways, but they both want the same area, so.
Sounds like it's getting resolved to you?
I don't think so.
Because I was going to say the number of calls about Dover have increased.
Yeah, this area specifically, both the cities have their rationales to why they want it, so it'll be up to the board to draw the line, so. That might take
Flipping
a
a
couple of
coin?
hearings to get through. What's that?
Flipping a coin?
Sure. However it is the board wants to evaluate it.
That's a huge spot.
Any other questions on these?
No, we help them figure it out on their own.
As I get these in, when you have these conflicting areas, we have this conflict in the state statute that Bill and I are trying to solve. We're supposed to have a hearing within 60 days of receiving these, but then when there's an overlap, we have to solve those too. So if one city jumps the gun and gives it to us early, are we under a 60-day time clock, or are we under this solve the overlap time clock, or a clock, right? So.
When does the clock start?
Yeah, so Bill, feel free to jump in if you like, but without taking up too much time, we need to solve the overlap, and so we need both proposals from both cities to solve that.
So what timeline did we give them to give us a response?
So the memo I sent out, I asked for all proposals to be in by, I think, late spring, like June, so that we can do hearings through July, August, September. So
During budget time? Okay.
shouldn't be too much time, should be fine. Okay, so before I get to the next item, we have review and feedback on land use staff reports and previously heard files. I don't have any feedback for the board. I think we've discussed this already regarding, like, Mr. Domke and I discussed this on fairness. I think we had this discussion regarding a reconsideration request on if you're going to request additional documentation from an applicant, give them the opportunity to provide that before you make a decision on the file rather than approve or deny it. So that's my only feedback to the board, so I don't have anything additional.
Say it a little bit louder, that includes.
Sorry. Should have brought some water with me. So if the board is going to evaluate and say, we don't have this in the file, therefore we're going to deny it, and it's something that's not required in the submittal request, but it's something that would have led towards an approval, you're essentially asking for additional information. I just requested that the board give them an opportunity to provide that, continue the hearing, and say, if it hinges on a will serve letter, for example, saying, and we've never required that in the past for an application type, then give them the opportunity to bring that forward before you make a decision. So. You recall that conversation, Commissioner Williams?
Well, I do, but I don't believe that decision hinged on that will serve letter. But I would say that if planning is receiving, doing files, and in the planning, in that particular hearing, it commented on will serve, and you make the comment that we have not received it, I think it is incumbent upon the person to, if it was worth noting that we didn't have it, there's a reason, and you draw attention to the lack of will serve letter. But I don't think that file hinged on whether or not, for me, it was not a will serve letter hinge on that. But I absolutely agree with, she now needs the water. What
I
happened?
know, right? I handed me water and started coughing.
Are we good? I absolutely agree with continuing if it's we want additional information. I think we did do that even with Schweitzer when we had them and we asked for things that they didn't give us. We continued it and then they declined to provide it and they said they didn't want to move forward.
Any other feedback on land use files for the?
I've gotten a lot of feedback on the deliberation from the board and the community feeling like, regardless of kind of the decisions being made, that they're hearing very good, thoughtful discussions with a lot of thoughtful responses from planning staff when the questions are asked, especially when they're sometimes on the very specifics that you guys take the time to say, hold on, let me go back and see if I can find that in that hearing. So there's been a lot of feedback on that as we've gone through some very difficult files, even when they're files where we have not given this, we'll have a 4-0 decision from planning and then we switch that decision, but the deliberation explains the switch of those decisions. But also that staff is doing a really good job of answering the real-time questions that we are asking in the meetings. And so I've gotten a lot of that kind of feedback, so.
Yes, that's very appreciated, since I ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So the next is some social media account request for approval. Just so you know, this is a request for forgiveness, because I didn't realize this was in the policy until it was pointed out a couple of meetings ago that we, per the social media policy for the county, the board, or your elected official needs to approve the creation of a social media account. So in this case, I've created a LinkedIn page and a Nextdoor account for the planning department.
What is that? What is a Nextdoor account?
So this was brought up at one of our workshops with the planning commission. It's like, well, do you guys have Nextdoor? Do you post it there? So Nextdoor is another type of social media. It was built around governments connecting with their citizens. So it was really an emergency response so that fire departments and police can push out notifications to their constituents, right? Or to their service area. So rather than people having to go and like your page so they see your posts, if you're a certified government account, it just adds to everyone's newsfeed. So I have some numbers on the Nextdoor side where it shows the number of impacts on each one of the posts. So that's this page here. If I can get my pages right.
It's a rough
I remember the
analogy.
name, I think it was, if the word is, it's not.
It's a really rough analogy, but it's almost like the idea of Nixle, where if you sign up, you're saying, I want to be in a geographic area or a particular type of data group, and then you're getting feeds
So it's like
from
your
that.
neighborhood app.
Yeah, it's specific neighborhoods. So people outside from San Francisco can't join your Nextdoor area and make comments on stuff you're commenting. So a lot of, my dog's lost, has anyone seen them? But as the government side, we can have outreach and post
Wait,
agendas and whatnot.
You
so.
said if you're outside of our geographic area.
Yeah, so if
you
you're outside
cannot?
the geographic area, you can't join that area to make comments on things or to make posts or whatnot. So.
I think we,
Don't go there.
I'm not going to say it in this meeting. We'll wait till after this meeting on that one.
So, for example, we had 1,500 or 1,300 to 2,100 impression counts, which means people that saw these different posts, compared to the 250 people following the planning department Facebook page. So we're seeing a lot of just people seeing our stuff, and we get a number of people. If it's an event, we're saying we're going to have this meeting. We posted this one on Nextdoor, for example. Some folks will comment on there or say, I'm going to that event. So it's just another public outreach to try to get people aware of planning efforts. So Like I said,
First.
it's an action item because that's what the policy requires. So
Yeah.
if the board wants me to take these down, I can deactivate these accounts. The LinkedIn side is just for when I have an opening, you get one free ad essentially with LinkedIn where I can post an opening with the planning department without any fees. So if I can link it specifically to our department, I think the only department that has a LinkedIn page is the Human Resources Department. So if anyone works for the planning department, they say they work for Human Resources on LinkedIn.
So you have an action item on the next door, a thing? Is it for us to leave it on or take it down? So my legal question is, can the county engage in an application that geographically restricts people from participation? Because we have people outside of our even state that participate every Tuesday in our meetings.
That's a good question for them.
Yeah, I'm here, guys. Is it like a public forum where people are encouraged to respond, or is it just for notification purposes?
We close the discussion on these so people can't comment on each post. So it's not we don't do polls or anything like that. It's specific events and publishing like event times of meetings and locations, so people are aware. We use this a lot for our open houses when we're doing around the county, just letting people aware of the planning efforts.
Then I don't have a problem with it because all it's doing is providing additional notice for people to participate. If it became a public forum, and then we ended up excluding people based on geography, I'd probably end up having to do more research on it. I wouldn't foreclose it right away. But since it's not a public forum and all it is just it's a digital posting to encourage participation, I don't see any problem with that.
Are the postings on that application exactly the same posting on the other forms that are open to everybody regardless of geographic location?
Yes. So
Because I hesitate on an answer that says I would do a little bit more research. Only I don't know the application, but when I hear that there's a restriction on who can participate, and you look at the people that do participate, that's the challenge of that I don't want to pay for. So I just want to be.
I said if we encouraged people to communicate with us through that format, that would definitely be a red flag for me. But because we don't, I don't believe there's a First Amendment concern there, nor is there any other kind of discriminatory notice that I'm concerned about. I mean, it's no different than posting a notice on the courthouse steps. That's only available to people that happen to come and look at it. You could make the argument that makes a geographic discrimination too. As long as there's no ability for people to engage in a public forum, I don't see a concern. I just want to make it clear: the only place where I would want to do more research is if that was the case. But since it's not, I don't have a problem with it.
I agree with that perspective. We're not encouraging a dialogue and limiting people in that dialogue. It's just a push notification of data.
And at this point, what we're doing is creating an event saying we're holding a meeting. Here's a link to the agenda and minutes and how to access it. So we're doing that with Facebook as well, creating events and saying, go to the calendar, here's the information.
I think it's a good idea. Anytime we can find other avenues to reach out to the public, I think we should take advantage of it, especially when it doesn't cost the taxpayer any money.
I don't mind the cost of free. I just mind the cost of the person who challenges that they were restricted by geographic location. And one could argue a definition of communication doesn't require a response. It can just be one-sided. That's where my issue. I'm not familiar with Nextdoor. That was just my first blush of saying geographic restriction, and I don't think that it's comparable to posting on the courthouse because we're not restricting anybody. It's just there. This one comes with a known restriction, and that's my only concern is I don't want to start getting sued over inherent restrictions. But if Bill is saying that he doesn't think that that type of restriction would cost the county any, then I will go with his legal opinion. That's my concern is whenever you say you're not allowed, that's what we have been sued on. And we have paid even though we know that we are right because of the cost of litigation, so.
And I appreciate being thoughtful and, verifying that, but, I don't see where there should be a risk. So in this case, I'm comfortable with it.
Okay.
Okay.
So thank you for admitting the fact that it was a mistake, and I think we need to take a formal vote.
Yep.
Are you ready to vote on this item, Commissioner Corn, as well?
Absolutely.
All right, at this time, we'll entertain a motion regarding the social media accounts.
All right. Need to formulate something in my head, so just a moment.
I didn't write these one down for you guys, sorry.
So I just want to clarify, here we go. I move to approve the planning department's use of social media accounts in conformance with HR policy 1009.4.18 for the use of Nextdoor and LinkedIn as department pages, with the understanding that those pages do not allow for dialogue or discussion.
There's a motion, is there a second?
I'll second for further deliberation.
Except for deliberation. Second
Okay.
for deliberation.
All right, we'll go to public comment on this action item only. Seeing no public comment, deliberation by the board.
You have a hand up.
Oh, where's a hand?
Do you want to allow Brandon Kramer to speak to the public?
Yeah. Why do we not see all of it? I think this is what Bowman was talking about. You don't see the full screen? Brandon?
Yeah, hey.
All right, go ahead, sir.
This is Brandon Kramer. I'm a Bonner County resident. I guess I just want to clarify two things. One is it says an elected or an employee must get, I guess, approval from their elected official, as though there's a singular commissioner that they must get it from rather than a majority of the board. And so I guess I want to clarify that. It's kind of like a question, like, is that intentional or should it be a majority of the board? And then the second part, to sort of follow up on what Asia was speaking about in terms of restrictions and specifically Nextdoor as it has geographic boundaries, is I would suggest that if there's any information posted on any one of those sites, that it has to be posted on all of them. Otherwise, it is, if something only gets posted to Nextdoor, then it is inherently limited given those things. And individuals like Jim Lady, who likes to participate in our county proceedings, could never be privy to that information because he doesn't live within those geographic boundaries. So I think that it needs to be stated in such a way to where if anything is posted on one social media, it's posted across all social medias.
Thank you. And I think Director Gabel has confirmed that he posts the information on all of the sites exactly as you do on.
On Nextdoor and Facebook, I haven't posted any meetings on LinkedIn. So if you'd like me to, I can. I don't think that's a source where public is
I
engaged.
thought LinkedIn was an application, like a recruiting
It
app.
is. And we have a department page that employees can say, I work for this department at this county government. So I've never seen other departments or other counties use that for public meeting notifications. If you like me to, I can.
It's a recruitment tool.
Otherwise, Facebook and.
It's a
and
different
Nextdoor.
tool. So,
I know
but
it's
what
different
your
things.
Nextdoor and Facebook mirror the same postings.
And when we post on Nextdoor, there's a button that says, post this on Facebook, so that's what we do.
Okay,
So, yeah,
sounds good.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other hand up there? All right, public comment is closed. We'll go to board deliberation. Discussion on this item.
My only question was, the motion was that as long as we weren't interacting with the public, I just wanted to clarify, do we interact with the public on LinkedIn?
Only if they are applying for a position in the department. So it's not a public engagement tool.
Okay, because if we do, I just think we should clarify that on the motion.
Yes, there's no discussion board, if you would, it associated with the LinkedIn page, correct, Director? So it's a different style of platform, to clarify the.
But to clarify, it actually does have an option for you to message the person on it, and I think that might be what Commissioner Korn is referencing, is if, for example, there's an applicant that you're trying to schedule a job interview with,
Absolutely.
that the motion would not allow you to do that on the actual site.
According to
According to the way the motion was made. And so the clarification then is, when you're utilizing LinkedIn, are you using the app's functions in order to communicate with a potential applicant, or are you pulling out their contact information and doing it outside of that?
I've had both. So I've had applications through there, others I've had people message me about the job. So yes, I've used it to communicate, also to find information to communicate with.
So I think Commissioner Korn's concern then is valid, that the motion itself should restrict the dialogue and communication off of your Nextdoor account, but then the LinkedIn is a different type of account, such that you're not restricted from that, because the motion says then you cannot have that dialogue if you want to continue with that, because he's motioning that you won't have a discussion.
That's what I would report.
Understand the concern. Can we have the clerk read back the motion? Because I want to confirm the language.
She has to-
I'm not sure it limited LinkedIn.
So that's not how their information is. She would have to actually listen to
Wasn't
the
sure if she had.
recording.
Yeah, sorry, because it wasn't pre-written. So.
Right. But the way in which you motioned
Okay, we
it gave a disclaimer that we wouldn't be interacting with the public. And although it's a different format, LinkedIn has an interaction tool that they are utilizing.
So can we go ahead and vote on the motion on the table, and then if we need to make a new motion?
That's what
That's
I was,
probably the cleanest way.
so roll call vote?
Commissioner Korn,
No?
Commissioner Williams,
No?
Commissioner Dodd.
No.
All right, at this time, we'll entertain a motion. And so my recommendation is that you give a motion for Nextdoor and Facebook. And the reason I'm including, you said social media accounts, and then a motion for LinkedIn that allows him to do that action.
Facebook was created years ago.
Yeah.
I'm presuming that the director at the time got it approved. It's
You're
been-
assuming?
I-
You mean assuming?
Let's include it for clarity.
We're gonna assume, that we want to give you a clean start.
Fair enough.
All right, so Facebook and Nextdoor motion.
I move to approve the use of social media accounts with Facebook and Nextdoor by the Planning Department per HR Policy 1009.4.18, with the limitation of not engaging in discussion or dialogue on those platforms. We want to
Second?
do a separate motion for LinkedIn.
Any comment from the public on that motion? All right, seeing none, discussion from the board.
So just to be clear, Director, that we're not interacting on Facebook either, is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
All right. Anything further?
No?
Roll call vote?
Commissioner Williams,
Yes?
Commissioner Korn,
Yes?
Commissioner Dodd.
Yes.
All right, and now we'll entertain a motion regarding LinkedIn.
I move to approve the use of a LinkedIn account and page for the planning department for HR policy 1009.4.18.
Second?
Were we going to say allowing for the comments back and forth?
I was going to say nothing, but I think that it's trying to think about the tool. Yeah, I guess in case the tool isn't.
The interaction.
With the approved use of communications within LinkedIn for applications for employment, but not to engage in general discussion groups. Trying to use broad language because I don't know how the platform
Okay,
defines those.
can I make the motion for you on that one?
Sure.
So I'll step down from the chair and motion that the planning department be permitted to use LinkedIn in line with HR policy 1009.4, allowing the planning department to engage in discussion with potential applicants using the platform's software. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Any discussion, any public comment on that motion? Seeing none, discussion from the board.
But do we want to provide any limits? In other words, I believe LinkedIn has an area where you can you can just do general discussions, a discussion board, which is why I included the limitation in my motion, because you can still be a part of a discussion board on that platform.
They're utilizing it for applications.
I'm just saying the tool has the ability to do something, so do we want to?
Facebook has the ability to do something too, but we just choose not to do it.
Well, we stipulated that they can't do it in the prior motion for Facebook.
So I said that they utilize it for applications and they're utilizing the software for that. That discussion board is not for, they could use that discussion board to say, hey, Bonner County has an application for this online. So the whole function of LinkedIn is about applications. So you could, in a generic discussion board, write about an application area. And so to restrict them from saying, work for Bonner County, I don't see the
Yeah,
point of doing that.
if a discussion plays out, then we have to make sure we don't limit anyone's communication in that part of the tool.
So it's not limited, because the way I motioned it was that they utilize the software. So what are you wanting to see?
I think we need the same prohibition about within the discussion board portion of the tool.
But he's
Otherwise-
using it to advertise.
So you can directly message an individual in LinkedIn, or you can take part in a broad discussion board.
Which he could use the discussion board to advertise for his,
Right, but you can do
As a
the same
job.
thing on Facebook, but then we don't want to.
Can I chime in on this, guys?
They don't use it. Sure.
So for First Amendment purposes, like social media is considered, like the modern day could be like the public square, right? So Facebook and other types of places like that are the places where we want to, if we do allow public comment at all, it needs to be a free flow of exchange of ideas. I don't use LinkedIn, but if we're only using it for the limited purpose of recruiting people, we're not holding it out as a place for a public discussion, a forum. We're just using it for a specific business purpose. I don't think that it would fall under the same the same concerns about First Amendment protections probably don't apply there, because we're not offering it up as a public forum or the public square. We're just using it because we want people to come work for us. So the whole premise is different. And I'm not sure the same concerns apply there.
So my concern, Bill, and I appreciate that perspective, is I go and I see somebody, a business or an entity has a page. I choose then to try to interact with them in a discussion board and call them into a conversation about something I don't like about their business. Now I've created engagement that business didn't intend. So are we just going to ignore that, or?
Yeah, I think just as a best practice, if we on our side of the equation just don't use the service for that function, then we're fine. Then we don't engage with somebody, then we're good. I don't know. I feel like we may be overthinking this. Is what I'm concerned about.
I think the problem is that I think what you're really saying is you want to be specific on what communication the director puts in that box. And I'm saying that box is necessary for him to be able to use. And so I think whatever communication goes in the box is addressed by HR policy, code of conduct. The use of the platform itself is what we are voting on, and the concern you have is addressed by HR policies.
Well, I don't know that it is. I think the reality is we just have to be sure that we never limit someone's ability to post. If we're going to allow posting, then we can't limit someone's ability to post. one or the other.
But you're not, the LinkedIn account is only Director Gabel's interaction. He's not, so that's the one who is reaching out and having the communication. It's not a platform like Facebook. LinkedIn is, he saw Asia's resume and he messages Asia about, do you want to work here?
But it's not only limited to that use, is what I'm saying. It has the ability to act a lot like Facebook.
I think you mean comment.
Commenting in discussion boards, there's dialogue engagement where anyone can choose to participate if you do it. So that,
Okay.
all I'm saying is functionally, no matter what label you put on it, it has the same capability functionally. So either we're concerned about allowing discussion threads to happen or we're not. So either we need to limit that or say that it's okay if they happen, but the rule is you never limit those discussion threads. Because no matter what our intent is, somebody could change the intent with how they use it.
I don't know if it has the functionality, if I were to make a discussion board post, to limit comments or to turn off comments. I know specifically Nextdoor does.
Yeah, I don't know if you can turn them off. I just know that they can start, that they can be generated, so.
So
That's my point.
I guess I don't see anything wrong with the way the motion was stated, because if Director Gabel saw a discussion board for new hires and he put a comment in there saying Bonner County is hiring, there's nothing wrong with that comment. His conduct is addressed in HR policy.
Yeah, all I'm saying is no matter what the director posts that's appropriate, I'm not questioning that it would be appropriate. It's simply somebody can hijack that discussion and take it in a different direction. And we just have to be okay with that. Because we can't turn it off. We can't stop it then, because then we're limiting their free speech. So that's my concern. If you and Commissioner Corn don't have that concern, we can move forward. I don't think, it never matters what our intent is. All that matters is what the capability is of somebody else to do.
I'd like to call the vote.
All right, roll call vote.
Commissioner Dumpy,
No.
Commissioner Corn,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams.
Yes, motion passes. Next item, action.
We were at 2:55, Commissioners, so we do have we say the exact same thing.
It was stereo for me.
So we have 4 more action items here. Would you like to table those for?
Let's table those for our next meeting and jump into executive session for the last item.
So you're not coming back in?
Nope.
That
We
was
got
my
a
next
hard
question, is
stop.
do you want to open back up
Nope.
into session? Okay.
We said if we were going to be too filled, we would just push it onto another one because we knew it was going to be long and nobody wanted to sit here this long anyhow. So, all right, it is 2:56 and do we have a Zoom for executive session?
No, not one specific.
We need Bill
Call
on.
Mr. Wilson.
You can't go into executive session for her item without Bill.
Well, can't we confirm that we don't have anyone else on? We control the Zoom.
Usually it doesn't work that way. Usually we knock everybody out and,
We do have,
I can review them usually.
Yeah, if this ends up on YouTube, it would all be one YouTube.
you can remove the other people, is what you
I
said?
can, yes. When are you gonna reschedule? Because if it's just gonna be like next week to finish this, then that's fine. If they wanna put it off another month.
for these items.
Yeah.
We could bring it forth on another agenda.
Yeah.
We need to do a special meetings
That's, yeah.
so that it doesn't wait a month, to your point.
Yeah, well, these were all gonna be done in January, but.
Are you talking about the lien?
Yeah.
We're doing it right now.
Okay, if you're.
Well, that's why we were stopping at 2:45 to do executive session.
I was just saying if we were going to have another meeting soon, then that would be fine.
No, that's what the stop was for, is to get the executive session items. Did
Do you want me
we?
to remove those 2 other public members?
Yes, public members, we're going to disconnect you from the Zoom link here. Thank you for your participation.
So I have a question. Just by disconnecting that Zoom link, does this continue on the YouTube video?
We're gonna have to stop. We're gonna stop YouTube and the
We're
recording.
we're stopping YouTube.
Okay.